Many of you will know we have an intern program here called Rock Moss, and we are training interns to be ministers of the gospel in whatever place that God has called them. And one of our interns is Tanner Johnson. I'm inviting him to come and read the scriptures for us.
Please stand for the reading of God's Word. We'll be reading Isaiah 28, verses 1 through 22. And if you're reading in the Bible under your chair, it's page 588. This is the word of the Lord. Ah, the proud crown of the drunkards of Ephraim, and the fading flower of its glorious beauty, which is on the head of the rich valley of those overcome with wine. Behold, the Lord has one who is mighty and strong, like a storm of hail, a destroying tempest, like a storm of mighty overflowing waters. He casts down to the earth with his hand. The proud crown of the drunkards of Ephraim will be trodden underfoot, and the fading flower of its glorious beauty, which is on the head of the rich valley, will be like a first ripe fig before the summer. When someone sees it, he swallows it as soon as it is in his hand. In that day, the Lord of hosts will be a crown of glory and a diadem of beauty to the remnant of his people, and a spirit of justice to him who sits in judgment, and strength to those who turn back the battle at the gate. These also reel with wine and stagger with strong drink. The priest and the prophet reel with strong drink. They are swallowed by wine. They stagger with strong drink. They reel in vision. They stumble in giving judgment, for all tables are full of filthy vomit, with no space left. To whom will he teach knowledge, and to whom will he explain the message? Those who are weaned from the milk, those taken from the breast? For it is precept upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little, there a little. For by people of strange lips and with a foreign tongue the Lord will speak to his people, to whom he has said, This is rest, give rest to the weary, and this is repose, yet they would not hear. And the word of the Lord will be to them precept upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little, there a little, that they may go and fall backward, and be broken and snared and taken. Therefore, hear the word of the Lord, you scoffers, who rule this people in Jerusalem, because you have said, We have made a covenant with death, and with Sheol we have an agreement. When the overwhelming whip passes through, it will not come to us, for we have made lies our refuge, and in falsehood we have taken shelter. Therefore, thus says the Lord God, Behold, I am the one who has laid as a foundation in Zion a stone, a tested stone, a precious cornerstone of a sure foundation. Whoever believes will not be in haste, and I will make justice the line, and righteousness the plumb line, and hail will sweep away the refuge of lies, and waters will overwhelm the shelter. Then your covenant with death will be annulled, and your agreement with Sheol will not stand. When the overwhelming scourge passes through, you will be beaten down by it. As often as it passes through, it will take you. For morning by morning it will pass through, by day and by night. And it will be sheer terror to understand the message. For the bed is too short to stretch oneself on, and the covering too narrow to wrap oneself in. For the Lord will rise up as on Mount Perazim, as in the valley of Gibeon he will be roused to do his deed. Strange is his deed. And to work his work, alien is his work. Now therefore, do not scoff, lest your bonds be made strong. For I have heard a decree of destruction from the Lord of God of hosts against the whole land. This is the word of the Lord.
You can be seated. You can see why I gave Tanner that reading. I'm sure that was perfectly clear to you. And any preacher in his right mind would skip that chapter. But since I'm not a preacher in my right mind, as you're about to find out, we're going to work through it. One of the primary ways that we learn as human beings is by example. We learn by example, both positively and negatively. We can look at someone's life who has been diligent, faithful, person of integrity and character and hardworking, and we can see the positive results in their lives produced by their example, and we can emulate their behavior. Likewise, we can also look at the lives of those who made wrong choice after wrong choice after wrong choice, and we can see the destruction produced in their lives. Look at that negative example and not follow it, and not follow in that footstep. In 1 Corinthians 10, the Apostle Paul tells the Christian church that the things that happened to Israel in the Old Testament were written down for us as examples to us, so that we would see how God dealt with his people and that we could learn from their example in positive ways and in negative ways. Sometimes Israel is a people of faith, but more often than not, the people of God are a negative example. More often than not, they are like the person that your mom says, don't follow that person. Don't follow their example. Look at what happened to them. Don't go that way. And more often than not, that's Israel in the Old Testament. A faithless people who rebel against God, who incur his judgment. And the Apostle Paul says, look at what happened to them. Don't follow that example. Well, here in Isaiah 28, Isaiah is doing the same thing. He is calling on the leaders of Jerusalem that he mentions there in verse 14. Did you see that? These people who rule Jerusalem. He's calling upon the leaders of Jerusalem to look at the example of Ephraim. That's verses 1 to 13. In order to warn them not to follow in Ephraim's footsteps. Okay, so verses 1 to 13 in this passage, Isaiah points to the example, the negative example of Ephraim. And then verses 14 to 22 are the warning to Jerusalem not to follow their example. And then in the section that we'll read later on is a positive example of the farmer who does what God tells him to do, verses 23 to 29. So there's three sections here. There's a negative example, a warning, and a positive example. Okay, so you thought that passage was hard when you read it. It's not that hard, is it? So, maybe it is. So let's look at the example, the negative example of Ephraim. Now, Ephraim, in case you don't remember, is one of the names given in the Old Testament for the northern tribes of Israel, the 10 northern tribes of Israel, and their capital city was Samaria. Okay? And on the whole, the 10 northern tribes, these Ephraimites, these Samaritans, if you want to call them that, rejected God on the whole. They worshipped idols. They were proud. They rejected his word. They were idolaters. And they thought that they were so secure and wise that they actually called their city a crown. You see, and it's called that way. Look at 28:1. Ah, the proud crowd of the drunkards of Ephraim. That's not complimentary. And the fading flower of its glorious beauty. It's talking about the city which is on the head of the rich valley. Okay, so Samaria, the capital city of Ephraim, was built at the head of this rich, lush valley that produced wine and grain, and they were prosperous. The city was strong. They were proud. And because they felt secure in their own strength, they gave themselves to drunkenness and debauchery and to hedonism. Okay? They gave themselves to immorality and idolatry. And even their priests and prophets were drunk. It's an interesting twist, right? They're swallowing wine, but in verse 7 it says, they're actually swallowed by the wine. And they speak stumbling and reeling in giving their judgments and teaching. So the prophets and the priests in Samaria were just as drunk and useless as the rest of the people. And the people, though, because they were drunk and prideful, they actually believed what these false teachers were saying. They actually believed what the false prophets were saying. And it is a picture of just about any city in our world today. Samaria. Proud. Look at our glorious buildings. Look at our strength. Look at our wealth. Look at our prosperity. Look at our wisdom. We have embraced prophets and false teachers who tell us what we want to hear. We've embraced their lies even though they're drunk and don't make no sense. And we feel safe and secure. We've walked away from God. And where there is pride, immorality follows, and immorality is promulgated by falsehood, by false prophets. And when you have that whole situation, which is so akin to so many cities today, well, what happens to God's word? When there's pride and immorality and false prophets and false teaching promulgating falsehood and lies, what happens to God's word? Well, it's mocked. God's word is mocked and ridiculed. And that's exactly what the people of Samaria do. Look at verses 9 and 10. Look at verses 9 and 10. This is the voice of the people of Samaria. This is what they think of God's word, of Isaiah's message. Everybody following me so far? This is what they say. To whom will he, that is Isaiah, teach knowledge? And to whom will he explain this message? Those who are weaned from the milk, those taken from the breast? In other words, Isaiah, your message is so simple, it's for babies. It's gibberish. Why are you teaching this to us? We're so far above this. Look at what they say. Isaiah, your teaching is just like precept upon precept, line upon line, here a little, there a little. It's like how you teach children their ABCs. It's childish. We have sophisticated prophets. We have sophisticated understanding. We have better teaching. We have better truth. Your teaching is it's pathetic. It's not even fit for little kids. That's what happens when a people swollen with pride embrace falsehood and immorality. They hear the Bible and they go, that's childish. Those are myths. Those are fables. That's a joke. Why would anybody believe that? It's, again, a picture of what's happening in our world. I mean, you can say anything you want to say on a college campus as long as it doesn't come from the Bible. Right? When's the last time you heard on the news, Buddhist student group forced to take down its poster of Buddha? You never hear that, do you? Why? You always hear student group, Christian student group, forced to shut up, stop proselytizing and harrowing other students with their messages, It's amazing. Well, it's because if you live in a world that's swollen with pride and has embraced falsehood and immorality, God's word's mocked and ridiculed. It is. It's happening today. It's viewed as archaic, child's myths. Because we're so evolved and modern and sophisticated, we're multicultural, we know that there's truth in everything. There's a little truth here and a little truth there, and you can follow the truth that you want to, and that's wise. And so we mock God's word. That in the person of a Galilean carpenter, God dwelled bodily and sacrificed himself on a Roman cross to turn aside the wrath of God against our pride. That's our message. That's our message. And we yell, foolishness. Foolishness. Who would want to chant a dead man's name? That's what people think. That's what the Greeks thought of Paul's preaching of the gospel as foolishness. That's what the Samaritans thought of Isaiah's message. This is childness. You believe in an invisible God. Isn't a visible God better than an invisible God? Well, for those Greeks and Samaritans among us, and I'm sure that there are some, God says in verses 11 to 13, "If you won't listen to my clear and simple word, perhaps you'll understand when foreigners, whose words you don't understand, come and destroy your city." So you might not understand their message. I mean, you might understand their words, but you'll get the message, right? Look at what he says. Verse 11, "For by people of strange lips and with a foreign tongue the Lord will speak to this people." Okay? You don't believe what Isaiah says when he says if you continue in this way you're going to be judged. Perhaps you'll understand when the judgment comes, even if you can't understand the words. Because God, look at verse 12, has said, and Isaiah has said to this people, "This is rest. Give rest to the weary, and this is repose." In other words, trust in God is where you can find rest and peace. And look at what it says, "They would not hear." Think of Jesus. "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." Be careful how you hear. And just as Isaiah, Jesus was rejected in his day. People refused to listen. Same today. Why? Because in our pride, we actually think that our words are better than God's words. That our ways are better than God's ways. And Jesus says, "Come to me and I'll give you rest." And we go, "I've actually got a better place to rest than Jesus. Thank you very much." You know, the people of Samaria called their city a crown. In other words, they lived under the rule of their own thinking and accomplishment and achievement. And you can only wear one crown at a time. You never saw a king try to balance two crowns on his head. It just doesn't happen. So God says, well, I'm going to take that crown off your head, and I'm going to be king. Verse 5, "In that day, the Lord of hosts will be the crown of glory, but just to a remnant, not to everyone. Just to those who survive the judgment." This is not a bad question to ask. Who wears the crown? What crown am I wearing in life? My own thinking, my own pride, my own wisdom, my own words, the foolishness of the false prophets and what they utter? Or am I sitting under God's word where he says, "Submit to me and you'll find rest"? Those are really the only two choices available to us. And in fact, God did speak to this people through judgment. In 722 BC, the Assyrian king came and leveled Samaria. Gone. I mean, it's just, you can see pictures of it on the internet. There's just like a few rocks left. It was the storm of hail and this mighty overflowing water, verse 2, was the king of Assyria that God sent and used the destruction of Samaria to speak to this people and say, look, you can't continue to rebel against me this way. You can't continue to live this way. So that's Isaiah, and he's preaching in Jerusalem, and he's saying, remember what happened, because Jerusalem doesn't fall until 586. So you're counting down, right? So 722 is before 586 BC. You got to go backwards. So in 722, Samaria is completely destroyed. And Isaiah is saying in Jerusalem, look at what happened to them. Don't follow their example. Listen to my words. Trust God. But just like the people of Samaria, the people of Jerusalem weren't listening to Isaiah. Look at verses 14 to 22. You remember Jerusalem was the capital city of the southern tribes called Judah. And Isaiah has been faithfully preaching in Jerusalem for 27 chapters, telling people to trust in God, to repent of their sins. But they have scoffed at his message. This whole section is bracketed with scoffing. Did you notice that? Look at verse 14. This is Isaiah now speaking to the leaders of Jerusalem after having reminded them of the bad people in Samaria and their negative example and the consequences of their courses of action. Isaiah says, therefore, hear the word of the Lord, you scoffers who rule in the people of Jerusalem. See, they weren't listening to Isaiah. He was standing on the temple stairways preaching, and they were scoffing at him. At the end, look at verse 22. Now therefore do not scoff. I've heard a decree of destruction. Please listen to me. Now scoffer is worse than a fool. Did you know that? Fools are bad in the Bible, but a scoffer is worse than a fool. A scoffer is someone who has not only rejected God's word, but who mocks it and encourages others to mock it as well. That's what a scoffer does. He's a heckler. He's rejected God's word. He mocks it as gibberish, childishness, and then encourages others to mock it as well. He gathers the crowd around and says, hey, let's ridicule this one. Do you ever see that happen in a public context where a Christian stands up to speak? Oh yeah, happens all the time. Now, the reason the people of Judah were mocking God's word through Isaiah was that they had actually placed their trust for security in a political alliance with Egypt. And you're saying, where's the political alliance with Egypt here? I'll show you. Egypt had pledged to defend Jerusalem if the king of Assyria attacked. Okay? And Isaiah calls that deal that the leaders of Jerusalem who scoffed at God's word, the deal that they made with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, he calls that a deal of death. Look at it. Verse 15. Because you have made a covenant with death, and with Sheol we have an agreement. Okay? They have made lies their refuge. This promise of the Pharaoh that he would come and rescue Jerusalem should the king of Assyria attack. So Isaiah calls this political alliance between Egypt and Jerusalem for security as a covenant with death. You're signing your own death warrant. They're not going to save you, but you believe it. You've trusted in them. And you've rejected God's word. In chapter 29, therefore, Isaiah foretells of the siege of Jerusalem that's going to come. You're going to be destroyed. This deal that you made with Pharaoh, it's going to destroy you. That's chapter 29. Chapter 30, he begins to rail against this deal with Egypt. Look at chapter 30 and verse 1. Ah, stubborn children, declares the Lord, who carry out a plan, but it's not mine, who make an alliance, but not of my spirit, that they may add sin to sin, who set out to go down to Egypt without asking for my direction, to take refuge in the protection of Pharaoh, and to seek shelter in the shadow of Egypt. You see, that's what it was. And Isaiah is saying, you're like stubborn children. I'm telling you to trust in me. You will not trust in me. You would rather trust in a pagan king to save you. You would rather trust in an army that you can see than in the Lord of hosts, who has an invisible army of angels to protect you. And it's our temptation too, isn't it? It is so much easier to trust in things that we can see. You just think of any example in your life that makes you feel secure. When you see the bank balance and it's good, you feel better, don't you? You do. You feel more secure. When the bank balance is down, you're kind of feeling more anxious. Because it provides security for you. You're trusting in it. Do you know how fast that can evaporate? I know how fast that can evaporate. And so your life goes like this. As the things in this world that you're putting your trust in disintegrate and change, you go down. Right? Where God is saying, look, I am constant. My promises are true. You can put your trust in me. But no, we would much rather trust in things that we can see. But we know these things are not going to remain. He rails against it again in chapter 31. Look at 31, verse 1. This is a curse now. Woe to those who go down to Egypt for help and rely on horses, who trust in chariots because they're many, and in horsemen because they're very strong, but do not look to the Holy One of Israel or consult the Lord. So Isaiah is saying, look, this deal that you made with Pharaoh, you think that because you can see their horses and their army, that makes you safer? No, it's a deal with death. It's a deal with death. In fact, the king of Assyria defeated Egypt pretty easily. Pretty easily. But see, when you place your trust in things that you can see, in political alliances, in the machinations of your own mind, in your own schemes, in your own wisdom, then you reject being trust in the Lord. You can't trust two things. One is a deal with death. The other is certain and secure. It's the fight of faith that we all have to fight. The fight of faith that the people of Jerusalem were fighting, that Isaiah was saying, please listen to me. Listen to me. Trust God. It's hard to trust God when you got an Assyrian army coming down your face, isn't it? It's hard to trust God when all the wires are coming out of you in the hospital bed and the doctor goes, I'm not really sure what to do here. Right? It's so easy to transfer all that hope and trust into human beings and human thinking and human wisdom and not trust God. So Isaiah is pleading with them to listen to God's word, because to put your trust in anything but God's word is a deal with the devil. Look at verse 16. Therefore, thus says the Lord, behold, I am the one who has laid a foundation in Zion, a stone, a tested stone, a precious cornerstone of a sure foundation. There's nothing more rock solid than this. Whoever believes will not be in haste, or whoever believes will not be put to shame. In other words, you won't be running hither and thither if you put your trust in me, in my word. That is the precious cornerstone that God has laid, is faith in his word. Whoever believes, whoever trusts me will be secure. And I said it, in life we really only have two options in which to place our trust. In ourselves, in our own thinking, what makes sense to us. I like to think of life as meaning this. This makes good sense to me. And therefore it must be true. And I'm going to make it my refuge. I'm going to make it my trust. You can try that. Isaiah calls that a covenant with death. Or you can trust in God's promises. This precious cornerstone, a tested cornerstone, a sure foundation upon which to build your life and secure eternal life. Faith in him, in his word. So can I ask you, in whom or in what are you presently trusting? In whom or in what are you presently trusting? What crown are you wearing? What gives you that security and peace and guidance and direction that you so desperately need? It seems to me that people today will believe anything but God's word. Anything but God's word. No matter how radically crazy it is. No matter how ridiculous and far-fetched it is. Aliens. We have totally bought the farm and the market on aliens, right? There are people who truly believe Star Trek is real. I saw a thing on Fox News last week that said, Star Trek, not that far-fetched, was the title. Like, we're not that far away from wormholes and jumping galaxies and all that kind of stuff. Are you kidding me? And it's like we've told ourselves this over and over again, and we've begun to believe it. That we can teleport places. People believe in lizard people. Do you know the lizard people theory? Have you heard of this? There are people who believe that there are alien lizard people who rule the world. They look like people, but they're lizard people. There's like 7 of them, and they run the whole universe, the whole world. They dropped off from some comet that came by. I don't know. And they're like, you know what? That's actually pretty viable. I mean, when you say it that way, it means people they look at Scientology. You've got people hanging crystals off their rear view mirrors in their cars. They read horoscopes. They go to fortune tellers. I mean, what a joke that is. They read Dear Abby, anything but God's word. I'll put my faith and hope in anything but God's word. It's amazing to me the things that people are willing to believe when it just says, look, God loves you. He sent his son for you. Trust him. Oh. No, I think crystals are better. People are blind. God has to open your eyes. Have you ever really looked into the historicity, reliability, the veracity, the truthfulness of the Bible, God's Word? Have you ever really looked into it? I dare you to look into it. I challenge you to look into it. There's been so many people in history who set out to disprove the Bible and they end up Christians because it's so rock solid. In fact, next Sunday, Sunday school at 10:15, you will have a professor teaching you the historicity and reliability of the Bible, how it all came together, right? So bring him all of your Da Vinci Code stuff and challenge him. I want to see him sweat, but I'm actually looking forward to it. Okay? Because again, the Bible is unbelievable. Do you realize that we are reading out of Isaiah, which was written 700 years before Jesus, and it is more relevant than tomorrow's newspaper, isn't it? It's a message of faith and trust in God's Word. Right? So this firm cornerstone that Isaiah speaks of, that God has laid, the inscription is, whoever believes will not be in haste. Okay? In other words, the cornerstone is faith in God. And this verse is used like 8 times in the New Testament. And you can go search them all out. But the cornerstone is the most important stone, the foundation stone, the stone that gives shape to the rest of the building upon which everything else is built. And that cornerstone is belief, faith, trust in God's Word. Let me just show you one place where this is in the New Testament. Turn forward to Matthew chapter 7. I'll do Matthew this time. Matthew chapter 7. But there's 8 more times, and you need to go home this afternoon and find them, where Isaiah 28 is quoted in the New Testament. But let's just look at this, and this is actually quite stunning. So God said in Isaiah's day, faith in my word is the foundation of your life. Okay? Jesus comes on the scene and says, it's actually my words. It's quite a radical claim to divinity, actually, that Jesus would step on the plains of history and say, actually, you need to put your confidence in my word. Look at what he says. Verse 24. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. So my words are actually God's words that you can build the foundation of your life and eternal life upon. That's quite a radical claim. Believe my words. There's so many people today who are saying, believe my words. Whose words are you going to trust? Okay. So, the bad example of Ephraim. The warning to Jerusalem, don't be like them. If you do, you're going to end up like them. The scourge is going to come and it will beat you down just as it beat them down. Don't make falsehood and lies your refuge. Don't trust in the promises of men. Trust in God. Find rest and repose in His promises to you. Okay? That's what he's saying there. Now finally, the positive example of the farmer. The positive example of the farmer. Verses 23 to 29. And you can read it in detail, but let me just show you. Again, Isaiah says, please listen. Give attention. Listen to what I'm saying. Okay? And he shows the positive example of this farmer who sows according to God's wisdom because God has taught him. Okay? He sows wisely. He lives wisely, verses 24 and 25. For, verse 26, God has rightly instructed him. God is teaching him. He's listened to God. And then he harvests plentifully. He harvests plentifully, verses 27 and 28, because, verse 29, he's listened to the wisdom and the counsel that's come from God. So that's a positive example. And Isaiah is saying, look, listen to God's word. If you listen to God's word, you'll be like this farmer who sows wisely, reaps plentifully, all because he follows the wisdom of God. And if you follow the wisdom of God, you will be plentifully provided for. You'll be productive and fruitful and secure. In that very simple illustration, this very simple parable, he's calling upon us to follow God's word. It's never been falsified. It's never been broken. All of his promises are true. And we are called to listen to him, to reject reliance upon the wisdom of men and their promises, to put the Word of God as the crown of our life and the foundation under our feet. That's good. To trust in Him alone for salvation, for deliverance. Now Jerusalem's going to face this test here pretty soon in a few chapters. And you'll see God's deliverance. It's quite miraculous. So hold on to your seat for that. Let us pray. Our God and Father, as we've just heard your word, we ask that you would give us eyes to see and ears to hear, that we would listen, that we would make your word our crown and follow its principles, and that we would build our lives on the foundation of your sure and certain word that was proven true by the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. In his name we pray. Amen.
Amen.